Hello and welcome to another episode of Five Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green. Happy to be here with you and happy to have you here with us. And once again, as we're in our ninth season, which sadly might be our last season, um, is a returning guest who really kind of wowed me when he was here about 2.5 years ago. And then watching his career through the trades and the articles that he's written, he's just blossomed. Uh, and let me tell you a little bit about my guest, Justin Bailey. Justin Bailey is a 25-year student of the fire service. He is a fire chief for Oliver Springs, Tennessee Fire Department and a captain paramedic with the Knoxville, Tennessee Fire Department, where he has been serving since 2007 and currently assigned to Engine 1. He started his career in 1999 as a junior firefighter explorer for the Oliver Springs Fire Department. He is part-time instructor with the State of Tennessee Fire Service and Codes Enforcement Academy, delivering classroom and hands-on instruction in various topics on campus, at regional fire conferences, and at various local fire departments throughout Tennessee. And let's not forget that he is also led classes at some of the trade conferences as well. He has instructed nationally on the topics of volunteer training, program development, professional development, and rural fireground management, having presented at both FDIC and Firehouse Expo. Justin has an associate's degree in allied health science from Roane State Community College and a bachelor's degree in fire administration from Columbia Southern University. Chief, it's a pleasure to welcome you back to Five Alarm Task Force.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me again.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm trying to bring back some of the best uh, over the years. And I think our listeners and viewers who maybe weren't part of the audience back then can gain and learn from bringing some of these great guests back as we deal with our ninth season. So today, the chief mentioned that he'd like to talk about a combination between our two segments. One will be career development, and then the second one was, Chief?
Second one, we'll end up talking more along the lines of the generations within the fire service and
Yeah.
kind of how to incorporate some of the training aspect to it.
All right. Why don't we start with that one then first, and then
Okay.
come into the because I think if you don't know how to put the blocks together,
hmm
personalities, this like this, that one likes preferences, who are paramedics and firefighters, and some are just firefighters, EMTs. Talk about what that's like and how you see it.
So I made a quote one time and it was a joke and it kind of took off and my buddy Tom picked it up and ran with it and what it was, you've got four generations within the fire service. You got the back in my day crowd, which I am quickly becoming that guy. And I saw this on TikTok crowd, which is our newer generation. And, I was joking around. I got a newer guy that's assigned to me. He just come out of the academy and he said, "Hey, Cap, look at this." And he sent me a video and it was TikTok. And I just shook my head. I don't have it. It's just not for me. And where that comes into play for us within the fire service, all of us has got backgrounds. Everybody comes from somewhere. Even though uh, I am classified as a millennial, I do not identify as a millennial because a lot of times it's based on what generation was helped brought you up. So, like for instance, you know, the four generations you have within the fire service right now, you've got some that's in a fifth generation, which would be that silent generation right after the World War II years. They're quickly disappearing, unfortunately. There's a lot of job knowledge there that we can't gain back because they like I was talking to you about everything. They wrote the book.
Yeah.
We're just happen to be reading it now. But you've got baby boomers. That's the generation right now that is quickly becoming the retirees within your departments. You've got Generation X, which is that, jokingly, you can't tell us what to do generation, a lot of independent thinking and stuff with it. And then for many, many years, as I come through, it was all about the millennials, Generation Y. How to deal with these millennials. Oh, those darn millennials is usually what you'll hear and stuff like that. And I joke around and I raised my hand and I said, I is one for first. And for second is a lot of your millennial generation, we're 20, 25 years within our career and we're quickly taking over the positions of mid-level management on up to upper management in a lot of
Sure.
places. And then you got the newer generation, the Gen Zs, and even after them, you got Gen Alpha, which is coming up. Will be on us here soon. And each one of us interact a little differently. Each one of us learn a little differently. And it just really depends on what you're dealing with. So when you have, like you was talking about, firefighter paramedics and just paramedics, and you know, even that aspect changes in dynamics. So why I say that? If I'm working on an ambulance, it's me and my partner, and it's just me and my partner the majority of the time. So that group dynamic is kind of one way. So then you go in the fire service, and the fire service is big, broad. You can go from single engine company, one person on a truck, all the way up to four to, some departments are still running 5 and 6 firefighters on a truck. But I'll use mine for example. There is 4 assigned to my apparatus. 3 of us is bare minimum. So there's 3 different generations within that depart or within that truck. So me and my driver that's assigned to the truck, me and him are roughly the same age. We're 7 years apart. Uh, so we come up in a very similar generation. Our 2 guys there on the back both come up in a very similar generation, almost 20 years after we did. So there's almost a 20-year age gap there. So when we start talking about, just general life experiences, they're completely different.
I was going
Uh,
to say that I was probably a product, uh, not of those particular classes that of the kids coming in, but I think I was right that time as I couldn't ride my Brontosaurus anymore, and I had to go to a Stegosaurus. So, luckily, matter of fact, one of our initially when I first got to that department, our one of our tankers would ride like a brontosaurus slowly walks, but we got it fixed and we did really well with it. But it's what you're saying is so true, and unfortunately, I think what we've seen a lot of, and I picked some of this up from Chief Dennis Rubin, who's been a
mhm,
frequent guest on the show and a great teacher. Um, it's that we may come from different generations, but we're all doing the same job as our forefathers or foremothers did, but they had less than we have.
mhm,
We have more than they had, not because of, oh, it's discriminating with ages. It has nothing to do with that. It's industry.
mhm,
It's people dedicated to uh, helping fire departments, fire education, etc. That never changes because, for example, we used to carry little pamphlets when I was covering for a weekend or something like that. We'd have little pamphlets and stickers for kids. Anytime
mhm.
we bumped into kids, we went to the grocery store as a couple of folks from the fire department. We'd make sure if kids saw us, and we would always give them something. And and the chief said, because it was an idea with a friend of mine, and I kind of looked at, and he said, that was brilliant. That was brilliant what you boys came up with, and it doesn't cost. I mean, yes, there's a few pennies cost for the flyers and stuff, but if you're going out anyway, or you're going out to the market to buy the lunch and dinner for that day. And you're gonna bump into parents, you're gonna bump into kids. And it's how you make that first connection
Mhm.
that that really puts the label on you. Are you a stuck up, nose in the air firefighter that you're next to your deputy God? Or are you just another human who loves to do a job and loves to teach? I've been teaching since I was the age of 13 is when I started teaching, getting paid for it. A dollar an hour. But hey, when you're 13 years old and a dollar an hour, and I was in a band, so I was making another 30, $35 a weekend. But I think that we need to broaden our views with our mind's eye and our heart's eye
Mhm.
to see that all these generations work the very best they could with what they had. And it doesn't mean we're not talking about if the department was low on funds or had billions of dollars to spend. It's not that. It's what we do and who we are that defines us. That's why we live by most of us live by the motto, once a firefighter, always a firefighter. Right after our good friends and brothers and sisters in the Marines. It's always that semper fi and, hoorah. We don't have that call, but what you're teaching us, thankfully, is that we can bridge these generations. We just have to learn how to do it politely.
Right. And like we talking about bridging generations, all of us was the new guy or new girl, you know. And the funny thing is, you talk to some of, for instance, I had a captain. He come on the department in '77, and so there's a 30-year difference between now when I come on the fire department, he come on the fire department. Which I ate that up. I wanted to learn more and more each time. I just listen to some of the old stories. One, they were hilarious. Two, a lot of good life lessons in those stories on how things used to be versus how things are now. And so we was talking, and he goes, "When I come on in '77, I was the new guy, and we didn't know anything, and we were the worst thing that ever happened to the fire service because our generation was the worst thing to happen to the fire service." And then he commented a little bit later. He goes, "You're now the new guy. You're the worst thing that ever happened to the fire service. The generation don't know anything, and we're going to have to teach you everything." Well, I fast forward now. I've been in the department now. See here, 17, yeah, 17 and a half years with Knoxville. And the last recruit class, last few recruit classes I was involved in, I walked in and I was called kid a lot. I come on the fire department when I was 24. I was younger in comparison to everybody else. So I was called kid. And I was like, I'll never be that guy that'll call him kid. Just one of those things. So
Sure.
I walk in the room and there are a bunch of kids in there. That's what I looked at. I have become that guy. So, we look at these newer kids coming in, great firefighters, great firefighters. Um, you know, it, they're learning a little differently than we do. People say they're the worst thing that's going to happen to the fire service because their generation is, completely different than the generation that we come in. But there, like you said, there's a common denominator. We're all firefighters. We're all wanting to, help the community in our own unique way.
Exactly.
We joined the fire service to do firefighting things. We also joined the fire service to help the community in any way that they deem necessary. So for some of us, that means that, we're doing EMS care. That's what the community is deemed necessary. So, how do you do that? Well, every generation has dealt with that differently, and all of it's the same common theme. We've got to learn how to treat that patient, whether it's at the EMT level or the paramedic level. And you take, like when I went through paramedic school in 2012, well, you take that paramedic school compared to some guys who went through paramedic school in the '70s and early '80s, which was the forerunners of all that.
Right.
That wrote the book. Uh, it's two completely different skill sets, but still the common theme. We're there to help somebody. firefighting. Firefighting has changed, but it hasn't changed, if that makes sense. Um, I had a guy that was on the fire department in Oliver Springs for years. He done a lot of fire buffing and stuff. And when I realized that it has changed, but it hasn't changed, and we all, no matter what generation it is, the common theme is we're learning how to fight fire. I'm teaching a fire behavior class, and this is right after some of the UL studies and the forefront of that. And we was going back to more smooth bore, less air entrainment, and, flow pass and stuff. And I'm teaching this class, and all of a sudden, this gentleman that started the fire service in the '60s, uh, he's since passed away. Very, very intelligent guy and a mentor of mine that I miss dearly. But Tom Scott was his name. And Tom was sitting there and he starts giggling and just laughing. I'm like, what in the world? Would I say something? And he starts talking. And I go from being the teacher of the room to being the student in about a matter of 3 seconds. And I sit down. So when I sit down, he starts talking. He goes, the funny thing is, guys, what you're teaching right now, we taught in the '60s and the '70s. He goes, then we had this new ideal, and there's some new research come out, and we changed some tactics. He goes, we've went full circle, and we're back to teaching what I learned in the '60s and '70s. And he said, you stay in this job long enough, he said, it'll come full circle again. And you'll be learning the things you learned in the late '90s, early 2000s. Later on, somebody will say it's new. So, you know, the funny thing is a lot of times, like I said, common denominator, all generations, we got four of them. We're teaching firefighters. Now, how we teach firefighters has changed a little bit. Um, 70s, 80s, that generation, it was you do it this way. This is the only way you do it. More of a monkey see, monkey do. Not to take away from that, but it was more directive driven and stuff as far as terms of firefighting. So if you come up and the captain said, hey, pull an inch 3/4, go attack the fire, this is the only way you attack the fire, and there wasn't any like deviation from that. That was how it was done. Captain said so, that's how we're doing it. Come into the millennials, generation Y, right? And everybody's like, all right, why do you call it generation Y? Well, we like to ask why. We want to know the understanding. We want to know the why behind what we're doing. So one of the things often said from, uh, earlier generations is, we'll say, we're going to go in and attack it with a straight string. Well, why are we attacking it with a straight string? So old school method was you attack it with a straight string. This is the only way you attack it. Now we've got our students are, I want to say they're smarter than the older generation. That's a very bad misconception with a lot of people. They learn a little differently, but they want to know more of the why behind what you're doing. So they got to make it make sense to themselves, if that makes. So if I can come in and I can say, all right, the reason that we use a straight stream is that we don't want a lot of air in the environment. We want to be able to hit it up high. That way we got good water mapping across, cools the gases. Then we directly down onto the fire and actually cool the fire and go about our business. The other aspect is of the way that we taught, and with or older generations, I guess you'd say, with the baby boomers and Gen X. Baby boomers was more lecture based. Teach me what I need to know, and that's it. How to do the job, and let's move on. Gen X started doing a lot of self study, so it was still teach me what I need to know, more lecture based. Come into Gen Y, all right, teach me what I need to know. Give me a little bit. I'm going to research it myself and probably research you before you get done. And then Gen Z comes along. They can do the same thing in Gen Y faster, but they're very visual. learners. A lot of them are, and that's a broad paintbrush to paint with people. But I put a 5 minute video up, and they go replicate the skill. They don't need a 45-minute lecture on how to, catch a hydrant. Their concept is I'll read how to catch a hydrant later or before class. I've already know that part of it. You teach me some little pointers and stuff, but show me a 5 minute video how to do the skill, and I'll replicate how to do the skill. So there's a lot of that's changing. So as instructors, we're having to change a little bit, and some of us kicking and screaming.
Right.
I come up in the lecture based, and that's probably the hardest thing. I actually was teaching an instructor one class last week, and in that class, I was like, what's some things that for the students, and the students I was talking to was both of them were in their early 20s. They'd come in the fire department. They've been in the fire department for 3, 4 years now, and they were getting their instructor one. And I said, what was the major change for you from high school to fire department? And they were like, well, in high school, we were given a lot of the information. In the fire department, we're made to research a lot of the information on ourselves, more adult learning type deal. I said, okay, anything else change? And they said, yeah, the way it was presented as well. And we learned this with our most recent class is in a lot of the grade schools and high schools and stuff, they're using more gamification, you know, makes it fun, you know, and learning needs to be fun because if you're not having fun, you ain't learning. You're just, is this guy ever going to shut up, type class. But with the gamification of it, you're still getting the same information across, but in a different way. And if you do more lecture based learning or teaching, and you do it with a group of individuals that come up under gamification of learning, they're going to be bored and they're going to shut you down and they're not going to really gain the information they need.
Sure.
So there has to be a nice little balance. So as us, finding that gap is trying to figure out how we teach the earlier generations of the baby boomer Gen X at the same time we teach the Ys and the Zs and then the alphas later on because they're going to be completely different than even Gen Z. So that's some of the things that we're dealing with.
I remember back in my day, the chief sent my good buddy and I, along with our mentor, to the state fire North Carolina State Fire College. And the first year was getting state certified, which they had back then, because this is June of '78. They had first year was firefighter 1 and 2. This is before actually IFSA came out with that thing like that. So it was basically one class over the 4 days with then one day for actual work. The second year was hydraulics pump operations. Now that I was thrilled with because I was good at math and I could do a lot of these things in my head. And I always was carrying a small solar calculator. But I only drove a few times because I only drove when they needed me to drive. I didn't want to drive all the time as a volunteer because I didn't learn enough about being a firefighter. So I mean, yes, I had the local community training, the state training, but I like doing hands-on. And when I came in, I could use regular tools, hand tools, and early power tools. But I couldn't change my oil. I didn't know how to do it. I was quickly taught that once we were accepted into the fire department. And my mentor decided to tell me how to undo the pin, the little bolt on the oil pan. He never told me to move my face out of the way when I took that bolt out. So that was my baptism.
Some learned lessons.
Right. That was my baptism. of fire. But I think that over these, I guess, you mentioned about what you saw on TikTok. There used to be an app called Periscope, and there would be a lot of fire stuff posted on there.
Mhm.
But what upset me with seeing that is that I'm seeing chief officers with a white helmet walking in the warm, right along the warm and hot zone with their not wearing SCBA. Their bunker coats are open and they're at the rating. And I saw several smoking a cigar at the scene of the fire as they're directing it. That, to me, when I kept seeing that over and over, those sort of things, and the one I hated the most, and I still do, is taking a picture of the crew in front of the house that just burned down.
Mm-hmm.
All big smiles on it. You go ahead and give that homeowner a big smile. Say, hey, look what we did for you. We couldn't say much, but we got that little corner in the
Mm-hmm.
den. You can't do that. That's just not who we are. Most of us will stop if we see an accident within our purview. We're going to stop, call it in if we can, and start tending what we can do based on what we have until for other first responders show up to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still working on the same level. We're trying to do the same thing. As you said, we take an oath to protect, again, career, volunteer, part pay, WUI. We take an oath to protect our communities, structures, and lives in those communities of the citizens. And that's the key. That's who we have to be. That's our goal, to live up to that oath. And when we start playing around, oh, you're playing hoops in the back of the department building, that's fine. I'm talking about if you're screwing around when in the midst of an emergency. There's no
Right.
place for that if you want to be a real firefighter.
Like I still believe like you was talking about the photo in front of the house, that's one of those, you don't do it in front of the house. You do it in front of your rig, off to the side, away from the family and stuff. Because there's some of that. And where that comes from for me is I've worked a lot of last fires with some guys and don't have a photo of it. And so you lose a lot of that, not of the fire, but of the crew that was there with you.
Camaraderie, right?
Yeah. Um, Now, like you was talking about the not being able to know how to change oil and stuff. I'm talking about some of the skill sets coming in the fire service. So one of the biggest things I hear lately is that kid don't know how to do, we'll say, operate a chainsaw. And I said, part of that's our fault. So we've few classes now, both at work and then on some of my part-time stuff. I'll come in and I'll ask a question, who knows how to operate a chainsaw? Well, that number keeps getting less and less each time. And the question I raise is, they're like, well, they don't know how you use it. They don't care. I said, but why do they not know how you use it? Well, and I've read this quote a long time ago, and I can't give credit for who said it, who originally said it. And I use it, and it's not I try to always say, hey, I saw this somewhere. But it comes back to the fact, if a new firefighter doesn't know how to use it, know what a screwdriver is, whose fault is that? And I always revert back. It's always, whoever was doing the teaching's fault, or whoever's supposed to be mentoring that new firefighter's fault.
Sure.
But going back to the chainsaw part, I asked the question, why? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, how many of you still cut trees on your days off? Now you got a couple of tree cutters that do it and stuff. I said, but I mean, in general, I said, if you have a tree at your house, if you need to, cut it down for some reason, do you spend the time to do it, or do you pay somebody to do it? Well, I pay, and I said this about myself. I said, I'll pay somebody to do it. I said, so one, it makes sure that tree doesn't go through the roof of my house, because lo and behold, I would be that guy that would cut one down and it'd go through my house. But two, I don't have the complete expertise to down a large tree, and make it fall where I want it to.
Right.
And so who loses out on that? Yes, my kids do lose out on it. Now at the same time, we go somewhere else and we do the same thing and still know how to operate. But you don't get that a lot of times. You don't have, at least in my area, you don't have as many farm kids, that grew up and we cut and we operate and just manual labor type stuff. You have less and less people coming in there in the trades to start. So used to everybody had a trade on top of firefighting. Well, you're seeing less and less of that nowadays. Now we're getting a lot of high school, college students coming in to the fire service, and they didn't learn, plumbing, heating and air, things like that. You still have your ones that do, but they're coming less and less. Something that we recently dealt with, depending on where you grow up in the United States, is depending on whether you know how to use a lawnmower or not. So I'm in East Tennessee. We've got this green stuff on the ground. We hired a couple of guys from Nevada that did not have green stuff on the ground. And we're like, hey, yeah, by the way, on Friday we mow. And they're like, how do we mow? you know? So we've had some fun with that one on teaching weed eating and mowing skills, But, that's some of the things that you don't think about when, the fire service is a collective group. We have collective life experiences. So that collective life experiences, when it's merged together, 30 students at a time, and you're like, all right, everybody knows how to mow, right? And, three of the students raises their hand and goes, no, we come from, a part of the United States that we don't grow grass outside because it costs too much to do it, because they got to water the lawn and things like that. And you'll have others that come in and be like, hey, when does it snow here? And we're like, we get some ice. We don't get no snow, so, it shuts us completely down. And they got that dose of that medicine earlier this year too. But, you add that and you add like you said, you add in some of the generational differences of when we grew up in the United States and stuff. And it's a very good collection of mixes because some of the things you'll see now is people skills, like being able to interact with people. And I fear that our newer generations coming in within the next 4 or 5 years are going to have less of that because they've done classroom by Zoom. They've, because of, you had the pandemic part, the COVID, and everything kind of shut down. Well, we saw that aspect this past class and the class before because we had some of those students now getting into the fire service. And it's like you've got to actually interact a little bit more. They're a little bit, it's not that they can't interact, it's just that they're very shy about it. They're, whereas somebody that grew up without a cell phone, for the most part, they'll sit down and have a full on conversation for 30 to 45 minutes. And, oh, you know that person? No, I just met them, you know. And so you'll have that. And that's part of I fear. We are a good collective mixes, but I think that as people want to sit there with their phone in front of them and stuff, they're learning how to truly interact with people. So, uh, you know, it's going to be fun, but at the same time, it's going to be, a challenge.
Right, right. Well, I also, one of the things that I wish what we had today, I had in my day, which was those new electric gurneys that you have in the ambulances. Uh, we didn't have those in my day. We had to get 5 or 6 guys together to lift a 400-pound patient.
Yep.
Yeah, into it. And then there was only really room for one person to be in the back because they're hanging over the gurney. So, but
I,
I think it's great because part of the reason where I got hurt with my back was all those lifts we had to do
mhm.
back in those days. And every time I see it on TV, whether it's news or a fire show, there are only a couple that are worthwhile. But um, I just, God, I really wish we had that
Yeah.
back in the day. I'll go, okay, ready? Bing.
Yeah.
It would have been great. All right, folks, we're going to take a break here. And when we come back with Chief Bailey, we're going to be talking about, as we just talked about in this first segment, how different generations come together. Now we're in the firehouse, and now we have to talk about crew development. And so we'll be right back right after these words. If you're watching the video, you know you won't see anything different. If you're listening to the audio, we'll take a break. There'll be several PSAs, then we'll be back with Chief Justin Haley. Bailey, I'm sorry. And I got new glasses. Um, we'll be right back with Chief Bailey right after these words. As always, please stay tuned. And welcome back to this episode of Five Alarm Task Force. My guest is Chief Justin Bailey. He is both a chief of a volunteer department and a captain paramedic with his department in Knoxville, Tennessee. And we talked about in the first segment the concept of the generations, how we've all come. And I guess in this discussion, I'm one of the old guys from way back then. I remember you kept talking about 1977. That was the year I started. Um, and yet, to me, everything was modern at that time. I was the first time really working in a firehouse, not just visiting a firehouse. And I thought everything was right where it had to be. And we had, of course, even though we were volunteers, we had to know, we had to go through one apparatus at a time and learn what's every cabinet and quizzed on that. And one of the new guys who got in what I did says, this is a pain in the ass. Why should we have to do this? I said, why? Because when you need somebody to bring the power saw to save one of our brothers or sisters, I said, you want to be the guy to say, where is that? Because that could end your career very quickly. So right now, we're going to talk about, now that we've discussed the various generations, the four key generations that the chief was talking about, now we're going to switch lanes a little bit. You have them in the firehouse. How do you do crew development?
All right.
So tell us, how do we do that?
Very challenging. No, no, it's really good. I always tell people, when they come in, just starting out, and even a little bit later on and stuff. I'm a video gamer. I love video games. It's my little pastime and stuff. My wife hates it, but I love it. But I often tell people, I say, if you can tell me more about the Xbox controller than you can the fire truck, we've got our priorities a little bit wrong. So we get that new guy in, and we're trying to develop them into later on throughout their career. One of the biggest issues that I see within the fire service is certificate chasing. So I'll explain a little bit how that kind of goes here in a little bit, but um, oftentimes people don't want to spend time being the new person. Uh, it's an opportunity. What I thought was a big hang up within my career was actually one of the biggest blessings of my career. And what that was in Knoxville, and I've got two versions of my career. I got my volunteer side, and I've got my career side. So on my career side, Knoxville went through a hiring freeze, 77 to 88, and there was about a 10-year gap, and it caught up with the department every 10 years. So I hired in right at one of those 10-year gaps. We was up for a promotion. We go from firefighter to senior firefighter, which means backup driver, to master firefighter. Well, the master firefighter is a driver engineer that can act up to a captain's position every now and then. I was up less than a month away from my promotion for the driver's position, and they held the test prior to our class being eligible. almost 10 years later is when we was eligible to take the test again, when they actually held the test. It's about 8 years. I thought it was a big holdup, but what it did was allow me to be on the back of the fire truck a lot more. So where this kind of goes and what I'm talking about is learning the back's position before you decide to try to progress up. So I'm trying to develop a new firefighter, and one of the biggest things I try to talk to him about is, where's your perceived weaknesses? Where, I can see them, what I think is his weaknesses, but I want him to kind of develop himself as well. All right, where's your weaknesses? Where do you think you need to improve on? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? So we get that new firefighter right out of the academy, and one of the first few things we did was, hey, I sat him down and talk about expectations. Hey, welcome to the department. Welcome to my truck. We're going to have fun. We're going to have a good time. But at the same time, this is your career. This is a job. This comes with certain expectations that the citizens place on us and we place on each other. So while we are going to cut around and cut up in the fire station, even cut up in the truck, and quickly we can go from that to being on a call, and we actually have to be serious. And there's a lot of things that are on the line for that call. So, as I was talking to him, I was like, one of the biggest things for me is that you are in charge of your own career development. In a sense, I'm going to work on the skills part, things I see that we need to work on. And a lot of the things that we work on is things that I haven't worked on as well. And that's one of the things that a lot of them was like, well, why are we doing that? Well, we're going to go catch a plug because I ain't caught a plug in a long time. Okay. So, we'll do little skill sets and stuff like that. But my very first conversation with him, and then with even my crew, was, that I obtained after some switches and promotions and stuff, was that you spend at least an hour a day reading something about the fire service. There has to be a reading aspect to this. If somebody learned, or if somebody saw me back in high school and was like, well, that guy can read, and more importantly, that guy can actually write. So, it'd been two completely different people, but the new firefighter has to develop those basic skills. All right. Learning where everything's on the truck, learning why we use certain tools. They know the policies and procedures. They know the SOPs. You got to go over those every now and then with them. But my job is to give the why behind why we do certain things. So for example, structure fire, you're a secondary engine company. For our department, this is strictly our department. You're a secondary engine company. Your main task is water supply. All right. He knows that we're water supply. He knows, he roughly knows why we're water supply, but really understanding the importance of it. All right. How many gallons is on this truck? How many gallons is this line pumping out? Where all that kind of ties together. That's part of my job as the captain. Like I said, I was blessed in being able to do that, because on the flip side of my career, I'll use the volunteer side. I didn't have that time for development. I was a firefighter for a little bit in 2004. So I started in 99 as a junior, 2 years as junior, 2001 to 2004, 2005, somewhere in there was my development time as a firefighter. About 2005 or 2006, I took over the job as a training officer. And it's not the way you take over the job as a training officer. It was, hey, you're getting hired on this other department. We think you'll do really good at it. So I made a lot of mistakes in that part because I wasn't able to develop yet. Made the decision chief, then chief, from the time I started the department in 99, I was put in the chief's role in 2016. So very short time period for me, or at least for me, that's a very short time period. It's very young. So I'm trying to keep my firefighter from, yes, look for that next promotion, but at the same time, you're in this position at this time for a reason. take advantage of it while you're there. So learning different aspects of the job, learning how to throw ladders, learning your techniques on throwing ladders, learning your techniques on deploying hose lines, learning, what works for you. So, all of us has got different body sizes, different compositions, So when I'm teaching a lot of skills, I know other techniques. They might not be what I particularly use, but I'm going to teach them to be able to, so you individually can develop your own. That's that job of that firefighter. Moving on up, if you got a backup driver, or, if you go straight into the engineer, their job then becomes the development of, can you operate that truck? How do you operate that truck? Being open to criticism on operation of the truck. Um, you know, Taking in the fact that there's other trucks responding. So where do they come from? Where they not come from? How do they interact with, if we're doing certain tactics such as aerial operations, we're on an engine company, where do we play into that? Then you go on up one more step and you got that driver operator about to go into captain's position. All right. At that point, it's all right. This is why I made this decision, because now you're kind of essentially you're mentoring, because they can act when you're gone. At least for our department, they can act when you're gone. So explaining the reasoning behind certain decisions you make. And then on up, the next step for the next, you're always planning ahead for that next step, but taking time to develop. So one of the problems I see though is what I call certificate chasing. So what that is I come in, go through the recruit class 2 years. I got my firefighter two. Great. All right, what's the next certificate that I need? The certification class I need. The next certification class I need. And, they'll come up and they'll be like, all right, well, I need to get my instructor. In Tennessee, you be on the department 3 years and you can become an instructor one. Okay, I got my instructor one. Are you really true to the level of being an instructor at that point? Have you developed that expertise? And this is a conversation I had last week. Is you're now the subject matter expert? Do you find yourself to be the subject matter expert in whatever subject you plan on teaching? And if not, now is a good time to start developing that, because you should have developed it before we stayed in this class. All right, as soon as they get done with their instructor, they can go fire officer one. Well, they're still, senior firefighter. They're not operating in that position. Well, I need to get fire officer two, fire officer three, fire officer, the gambit goes on. And the issue that I find is we'll use somebody that got their fire officer two as a firefighter at their 4 year mark. Well, our department, you're not going to use that skill set for another 4, 5, 6 years. It's great you're in that class, and I understand you're in that class, but when are you going to use that skill set? Because now I got this piece of paper that says I have that skill set. Now, 6 years later, when I use that skill set, do I still have that knowledge? If you don't practice it, you lose it. It's like any skill set. If you don't practice it, you lose it. So if I'm not practicing that skill set and I lose it in that, time span, I'm still saying that I've got my officer two. Do you really have your officer two? So that's a problem that I see within the fire services. We base things on certifications, like your AirSAC and your Pro Board. So people try to speed through them and then sit back and kind of coast on the back half of the career. Whereas it should be a more gradual progression. Whereas, like, I'll use our rank system as an example of a firefighter should be working towards that next step, which will be the backup driver, which is, your driver operator skill sets. When I'm at that senior firefighter, well, my next position can move up to a master firefighter. So I need to, basic strategy and tactics, fire officer one. Then you always progress up gradually towards that goal. Another problem I feel a lot of people don't do, they get their certification classes. That's what they think they need. And that's it. And they don't get the filler stuff. And oftentimes when I talk about the filler stuff, they're like, well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, when's the last time you just took a random class on fire behavior? Um, I've not. Your 3 years in the fire service. What one subject we're going guaranteed to be dealing with if the house is on fire? You know, fire behavior. Probably should know a little bit more about it than the general public. So getting those filler classes that you're not always going to get a certificate or a certification with. You might get a, hey, thanks for attending, pat on the back, and here's your general knowledge. And I think some people feel like they don't get anything out of it unless they get a piece of paper that says this firefighter is certified, you know, in fire behavior. We'll use that as an example. Excuse me. And they think their time is wasted because they don't have a certification in it. It's like you're trying to gain job knowledge in it. You're not there for, trying to chase a piece of paper. You're there to be able to apply that job knowledge to your actual career that's going to affect the outcome for somebody else on that side. That's that's where that career development part should go.
That's, you know what, it's so key. We've had a previous guest on the show named Anthony Maggieri, and he's a specialist in directing people in the business world and what you're looking for and stuff. And he says, my first recommendation is don't get a 2 year associate's degree. He says, because it won't get you anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to have having that degree is not going to get you onto the fire department at a higher level than the next person just coming in the door. I mean, the same. He says, but the fact that you want to learn more, that you were considering the associate's degree, mark off your time so you can do a 3 or 4 year degree program. So you have a bachelor's degree in that specialty. So you're getting to be a better firefighter, learning more about firefighting, new tactics, new equipment. You're going to be
Mm-hmm.
spending 3 to 4 years there, and that would be the place you want to walk out with a diploma, not an associate's ticket, a diploma under your arm, saying, "Hey, I got my 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 schooling from, let's say, Columbia South, whatever it is, and then I did a 2 years master's in
Mm-hmm.
EFO or something like that."
Right.
And that's what he suggests is the a better route, especially for somebody new coming into the fire service. The better route is learn within the job,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody becomes a firefighter knowing what they have to do. Oh yeah, I can run that hose. Yeah, but we all know that's the least little thing you're going to do other than give a kid a lollipop. Okay,
Yep.
is throw some water. But if you know your craft, your trade, because that's what we do as firefighters. We have a craft and trade. If you're better prepared for that through education, just how well you could be on the fire ground or in administration or something like that.
So a lot of, and I heard this comment throughout my career and stuff, and a lot of people have, that book ain't gonna put out a fire. Um, that certificate's not gonna put out a fire. That college degree is not gonna put out a fire. You'll hear that throughout. And the common thing is no, it won't. But the knowledge I gained out of that book or out of that certificate program or out of that college degree program, when applied appropriately by a skilled person, can put out that fire. So, like, since we was talking about college degrees and stuff, I'm a big proponent of college degrees within the fire service at the appropriate level. And nowadays, the way the programs are now out there, you've got, like, I done distance learning, I done online. You've got brick and mortar still. You've got hybrids. There's really not an excuse not to have it. So where's that play in for a lot of people? And I have this conversation often. Is, well, is that going to make me a better firefighter or be able to get on the truck faster, things like that? And I'm like, well, no, but it's going to teach you how to one, research things. So if somebody comes up and you're part of a committee, you know how to research and, put actual thought to paper to be able to, present a study of some kind. I said that's one aspect to it. I said the other aspect to it, I said, we're in fire service. I said, if I take whether, any of the book manufacturers, Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2 skill level set, their book is very surface level. And I usually paint like a line across the board, and I'll put a little boat with a guy in a boat on top that's got a little fishing rod, and so far down he's trying to do some fishing. And I'll say, see where this guy is on the boat at that surface level. I said, well, welcome to Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2. That's what you know. I said, see this big old open space all the way down to the bottom to the board? Yeah, I said, that's all the knowledge you can gain within this fire service, but you're not going to find it. I said, because job experience is only going to get you down, be right there at the hook when you're fishing. There's still a big, deep blue sea underneath that you've got to gain other ways other than just job experience. So where that college degree comes in is giving you that other aspect to it. So I can take the surface level of a building construction class. We'll just use it for example, from Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2. It takes about 4 hours to teach that. It's about 80 pages long, and that's building construction for the fire service within Firefighter 2, 1 and 2 curriculum. Or I can take a fire science program of some sort that's going to dive into building construction as one of its topics as far as a course. And I'm going to spend anywhere between 8 and 16 weeks on nothing but building construction and how it relates to the fire service. So when you look at those two aspects, which one you're going to gain more out of it? 4 hours as a new recruit, not having any prior knowledge or skill set, or 16 weeks of diving in this topic, researching the topic, researching different aspects of the topic and stuff. Later on in my career, when I'm about to apply that knowledge in other aspects. So I look at a degree program as more development than chasing a piece of paper. I'm going to take all these little subjects that we breezed over earlier in my career, and we're going to dive down deep in the weeds. And, as a lot of people say, dive down the rabbit hole and really learn about what that subject matter is. And, the other aspect of career development, my personal take on it is like if I get to a certain position within the fire service, I should probably have a college degree already. Um, Unpopular opinion in some realms, popular opinion in other realms. I believe that if you're at that right front seat level of the fire department, you should bare minimum have an associate's. I know it's a lower level tier degree. You should bare minimum have that. You should have a bachelor's degree. You should be within the fire service within, we'll say 8 to 10 years. It's plenty of time to work on a degree, within that time frame. And where that really puts in is we'll compare professions with like the people that are working in the office that is a lot in the money for you to spend for your fire department and stuff like that. They have degree programs for their entry level. So by the time they get to that same career level with you, well, most of them's got, master's degree or even doctor's degrees and stuff. And it sounds really bad, but if I come up and I'm a captain within the fire department and I'm going to a mixed committee of, your accounting department, your city administration in general, and some city council members and stuff. Well, if all of those individuals have bachelor's degrees and above, and you're still at the entry level as far as like a high school diploma, high school education, they tend to just kind of look at you really funny, like, well, you don't really know, and it is kind of discriminatory because I've seen some very intelligent people that will blow things out of the water and never got a degree. But at the same time, if I'm trying to compare to the ones that are the decision makers, I've got to have it and stuff. At the captain level, the other reason is you go through at least comp one and comp two. I am, as you mentioned, and we was talking off camera and stuff. I've wrote a couple of articles and stuff, and that's a struggle point for me. Oftentimes, and what a lot of people don't realize is I write the articles. My wife, I joke around with her that she is just one of those grammar people that just she nitpicks my paper and stuff. And if it was for her, she's the one that actually makes me sound intelligent. So, because she'll oftentimes she goes, "You were from East Tennessee. You speak Appalachian. You write Appalachian." And you write how you talk. So she puts in the proper sentence structure sometimes, and she, still my stuff. She just makes me sound a little bit better, and that I done comp one and comp two, and I know how I wrote before that, and there's two different styles. So where that comes into play, we write a lot of technical reports. So if we're writing technical reports, we need to know how to technically, write technical. And PD side, police department side, does a really good job of teaching their officers how to write, actual reports for the court system. Fire department side, we somewhat teach how to write a report, but it's more of, all right, write a story, of what happened, and so oftentimes you'll see sentence structure wrong. You'll see, no capitalization, all capitalization, and I know some departments have got specifics on how they want things wrote. But where that comp one, comp two goes in, hopefully by the time you got through comp one and comp two, you know how to write a paper. You really know how to write a paper. You know how to put an organized thought process down in an organized way that somebody can read from introduction all the way down to conclusion and make out what you're talking about. So if we don't have that skill set at that level, what's our report starting to look like? So you read in, well, we showed up, we put some water on the fire and then we went home. Well, is that going to hold up in anything that we do or help out, anything we do? And it doesn't. So I personally believe, it's not that I think, I believe that college education is still an aspect of career development. We talked about that new person, how we get them up, right? We make sure they know everything about the truck, more than that spots, more, we do business during business hours and we make sure we got that taken care of. As an officer, I've got to do my part as well. And that's that next step. Well, the other, part of that is, with today's system is different than it was even 15, 20 years ago. I would have loved to have been able to do my bachelor's program now versus when I did my bachelor's program. And what I mean by that is there's a lot more financial resources, and depending on locality and stuff, but there's a lot more financial resources so that you don't have to pay for that degree program that you used to now because, you've got different scholarships that are out there that used to not be out there. A lot of cities and or municipalities and county agencies and stuff now do a career development program to where they pay for your college. So it's one of those things. By the time I've been in the department 10 years, I really don't have an excuse at that point unless I just really didn't, apply myself at that time.
Right, right. Well, I think you, this high gear of crew development, and I don't hear a lot about it. In the people I speak with, reading the trades. I think it's so necessary. It's like when I was the principal of a school, I couldn't just hire a teacher because my predecessor hired that teacher. and
Hmm.
then he left, went out of the country. And so I got to determine if that teacher meets the needs that I'm setting as the director of the school.
Hmm.
And I always give them the benefit because it's not their first time. First year teaching is not the second year teaching. Some have been teaching 3, 4, 5 years. So, but I would sit down with them so I could get to know them and measure where their strong points are and things they're not
Hmm.
comfortable with. And I had no problem uh, redesigning a little bit curriculum to make it easier. They make it easier for the teacher to use in the classroom, but not a burden to learning about it, how to
Hmm.
do it. And that's what I think for those 4 years at that school brought me to by middle of my towards the end of my second year, people now parents were now coming and talking to me about how much better their child is doing in the school, or I never knew that he could say those prayers or whatever it was. But I made sure that for that age group that I have the best teacher I could find in that community. And it was a rural community in
Hmm.
central, in the Greensboro area of North Carolina. Um, but it was, I was lucky that even in a small Jewish community like Greensboro, there were enough people who really want to teach these kids. So when I was looking to bring in somebody new, there were always plenty of applicants to do
Hmm.
it. And I think that if we can encourage through what you're saying, both about the generational growth and then the crew development we just talked about, and the fact that you added the frosting on the cake was you also agreeing that a master's degree, while you might not be able to have the time to do it in your first, 2 years, 3 years of being on the department, it's something that's able for you to be able to get.
Hmm.
And that's going to bring you up, boom, because a 4 year degree shows, number one, your dedication,
Hmm.
which will have an impression on the leaders that direct you and they see this coming. And it might ring off to some of the other members in the department and say, wait a second, you only got to pay $3,600 for a 4 year degree? Yeah. How'd you do it? I just applied for this on the website and it panned out. Not
Hmm.
everybody's going to get that. But the fact is, if your mind is set that I want to be the best firefighter I can be, I can't learn everything, but I can learn a lot. And if they come in with that attitude, I think you're looking at successful firefighters,
Hmm.
joining these departments because of that.
You do. You do. And, one of the, I guess you could say a challenge to that, you know, those motivated firefighters that are out there that have already done that pathway is you've got new firefighters coming in and we don't have a direct path. And I remember I took a class with Dr. O'Neill. He's talking about, you know, career development within the fire service. And, if you want to be a doctor, you know which classes you need to take. You want to be a nurse, you know which classes you want to take. You want to be that. He goes, if you want to be, of any rank within the fire service or especially fire chief, we don't have a career path from firefighter all the way up. But for the ones of us that have done that already, our job is to teach the ones that are below us. Hey, by the way, here's your next class. By the way, this is what you need to be doing at this time. And like, for instance, we've talked before about training schedules and things like that. And you're always going to have your department's training schedule. It is, it is set on a very broad stroke to paint an issue or to fix deficiencies within the whole department or bring in new information. At that company level and that mentor level, your job is to have another training schedule that's not the department's training schedule. It's individualistic. It's to that company. And at that point is when you're sitting down with your people and going, all right, this is where we're at. This is where we need to be. This is the goal from point A to point B and what you need to do in between those points. And if you don't do that, I'm not, I always believe in making things better, than what I found it. If I don't do that, I'm not making it better. I'm just saying, good luck, kid. I found out some way, you figured it out too. It's, best luck. So hopefully you're sitting down and you're saying, hey, by the way, this is where we're at. This is where we need to be. Like you was talking about yearly evaluations. We all have those yearly evaluations. We're currently doing ours at work. And during that yearly evaluations where we sit down, we talk, and it's very broad stroke. But at the same time, those conversations need to be happening before that. Hey, this is where you're at. Hey, what have you done to this point? Where are you planning on going? Have those little tidbits of information allows you to say, okay, you know something, you need to take this class. Well, I don't feel like taking that class. Well, I think you really need to take this class, and sometimes it takes gentle nudges. Sometimes it takes a full on shove. Sometimes, well, like a bear terms, bring a baseball bat, hit them over the head. It'll do some good, but you come in and like I said, you just got to invest. That's the
That,
biggest way to say
I
invest.
think that's most appropriate because you're, it's really a two-way street. Your community invests in you by you being hired for that fire department. At the same time, you have to invest yourself in not only just your department, but your community.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, things have changed a little bit because, a lot of communities today don't require their police and firefighters and EMS personnel to have to live in that specific locale. But if you come into the job with your hand out for a handshake, so that I'm going to help this community and I need a community in this department to help me do what I want to do, which is help my community. And so if you come in with an unbiased, real yen in your heart that this is what you want to do, then you got to demonstrate that. Don't just sit huddled in the back, in the new class. Be out there. Don't think you know everything because there's going to be half a dozen people that are going to know more than you do. But
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't bother you. You studied, you've worked, you've prepared. You have every right to stand up and speak at your turn and teach us. Maybe you might be able to teach us something that we overlook. But the
Yeah.
fact is, those who decide to come into this, making it a two-way street, those are the ones who do the best.
Yeah. And you know, let's take that new guy. You're talking about, maybe they could teach us. Okay. Uh, I want them to learn a skill. And it's a, I just drew a blank, but it's a pyramid. And it's like how much you retain so much is like 5% by somebody talking to you, 10% if I read it, 40% if I like write it down. Well, down at the very bottom, talking about mastery of skill and stuff, the very bottom is at 90% range. That 90% range is you teach a skill. So that new person been out of the academy for 17 years. New person just come from the academy. They may learn a new technique, you know. Hey, by the way, next day you're teaching us how to catch a hydrant. So that 90% range, if I want him to retain that, he teaches how to do it because he don't want to, peer pressure is one of those things. It works sometimes. Uh, so he's under peer pressure to teach this skill set to his crew. He's going to retain that information a lot more because if he is or she is, um, if they are really, really looking to benefit others, and actually be a solid individual. They're going to learn everything about that skill level or that skill set before they teach it. So
Right.
they're going, retain it 90%. The other aspect, you was talking about the community and the oath we took to them. And when we talk about career development, where this is going in career development, I think that the community is starting to expect more from their fire service. And there's a quote by Chief Eversole that I use a lot of times in classes, and I won't repeat it here, but it's pretty much they want brain surgeons to show up. They want to know you're in job inside and out. And if they don't feel like they're getting that, on the career side, it's pay and benefits. On the volunteer side, it's community support. If they don't feel like they're getting that, they're going to start pulling back on some
Right.
of that.
Exactly.
And, so like you see these job postings now, and, jokingly, I'm not moving, but jokingly, I made the comment one day of, that ain't but a 2.5, 3 hour drive from here to be able to make, up my salary even. But I look at some of these salaries from these job postings, and everybody's like, man, this person's make more, this person make more, this person make more. I said, I guarantee you go to that place and you're making almost $100,000 a year as a firefighter paramedic. The community expects more from that firefighter paramedic.
Absolutely.
They want you to know every aspect of your job. They expect you to be that brain surgeon. They already expected it, but now they're showing you that they expect it. So, if we see that aspect of our, if you're in your locality and you see that, hey, your pay is going up or your benefits going up and stuff, that's contract. Well, they're giving more. Guess what I got to do? I got to get more. So, that's not that we was not already planning on giving that. It's just that now they're pretty much writing it down saying, hey, this is the expectation.
Right. Right. And I think the best thing a new recruit can do is same thing that I did when I started, was that I just opened my brain to learn from the people who knew all about what I knew nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
And I just try to, sop it up. And luckily, this kid I met, he was 8 years younger than me. He still is 8 years younger than me, but we've all grown up. He's been my best friend since 1977 when we were both voted in. But that's something he brought to me also. He was an 18-year-old kid. I was 25 already. And and we were put together because we both voted in the same night. And we just gelled.
Mm-hmm.
In just a matter of a couple of months, we already knew what the other one was thinking. And we made a lot of calls together. We were sitting, well, when we first got there, we were still riding the tailboard.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, I think after a year and a half, OSHA came out and took that little fun thing away from us. And listen, I remember that two of our firefighters kind of tried to jump on the tailboard at the last second they should not have, and tumble out. No one got hurt seriously, thank goodness. But the fact is that we're taking on a job that could put us in the decision position of life and death.
Mm-hmm.
You can't come in knowing how to use a hammer, a DeWalt drill, and then think you're going to be the cream of the crop the day you start at the academy. That's going to get knocked off that smug smile is going to get knocked off your face within the first 3 hours. There's no doubt about it, if not before. So, so I think that if our viewers and listeners who are thinking along these lines, I think you should follow up, our listeners and viewers. Follow up with your department. See what you know and see what they want you to know. Because it's a lot easier to say, yeah, I got that done, so I'm just going to cruise for a while. If you don't show the determination and the personal inner desire to be the best firefighter medic, firefighter EMT that you can be, and goes for the best paramedics or the best EMTs or best law enforcement officers, you have to bring yourself and your brain to the game because there's no handouts in this game.
Mm.
That's for sure. We can't afford it, you know. So I just think you've covered these two topics so well. And first of all, I thank you for accepting the invitation to return. It's
You're
great to
welcome.
have you back. And the more I listen to you, the more I learn from you, whether it's our discussion here on the show or reading one of your articles in the trades. You always, it sounds like when I read your articles, it feels like you're speaking to me and not trying to parade to the whole world, oh, look at my latest article, stuff like that. You're trying to, hey, reader, pay attention to this. This could be really helpful to you. But you don't throw it in our face either. It's a nice teacher telling us how to better ourselves in this job that most of us love to do. And a lot of people, I mean, look, the chief is doing double duty. He's working as a regular firefighter with Knoxville as a captain and a paramedic, but he's also the chief of the volunteer department just down the way. So he has a wife, he has kids, but you always have to learn how to allot your time. Mm-hmm. And that's the key. That's how you'll actually be a better firefighter and a better person as a firefighter. If you realize you can't do it all in one gulp. You have to climb the ladder of learning and do your best at it. Are you always going to get A's? Not necessarily. I was an A student in high school, all through high school. I went to university, did an anthropology class, which I had to take as a gut course, they called them back then. And there was nothing there for me. It just, I all of a sudden, I spent 15 hours in the library because we didn't have computers then. In the library, taking notes and stuff like that, and I got a C plus on the paper. But my dad, may rest in peace, asked, "Did you ask the guy in the mirror if you studied enough?" And that was my dad's old joke. He says, "The guy in the mirror can't lie to you. He knows every secret you have, or he or she knows every secret you have." So he said, "Did you really study enough for it?" And I explained to him 3 notebooks full of notes, hours in the library, 3-4 hours at night. I did all that. He says, "Okay, bud." He says, "So on that subject, which isn't one you're interested in anyway, you got a C plus. Doesn't mean you're a bad kid. Doesn't mean you're not going to continue to get A's and B's with other courses. It was just this one thing. Take it easy on yourself. You don't have to beat yourself up because you thought you tried enough, and you did, from what you're telling me." He says, "And that's okay. You don't have to get an A every time. Your mother and I don't ask for you to get an A, or your brother's getting A's all the time. We want you to do the best that you can do. That's all we care about." And that's really about the people we bring into the fire service. We don't expect them to make a 13-story rescue single-handedly on their first day. We want to welcome them in to our family. Maybe they're cousins, maybe not an actual family, but they're cousins. But the fact is, you want them to grow into the family. You want to help educate them so that they can be the best, especially if you're their educator. You want your student or students to be the very best they can based on your teaching and the other teachers in the academy. And I think if we realize that this is not a game that we play of who gets in and who doesn't get in, this is based on standards, okay? And any of these type of public safety departments require certain grounding that you have. And if you don't have it, but you still have the urge, then they'll help you find your way. as long as you keep showing them your desire to be part of that team. And I think what you said today and shared with us, both from the generational lookout and the crew development, I think is right there is a playbook, a page from the playbook to take in. Because yeah, now you're at a different you're looking at a different couple of generations since your generation. And now
Mhm.
you're telling us there's more A's and B alphas and Bravos coming up ahead. But you know what? That could be good because that could feed more into. And as technology gets better and maybe gets safer, helps us be safer. Um, and that's a great expert on that is uh, retired Chief Charlie Werner from DroneResponders.com
Mhm.
because he got really into electronics and technology in the fire service. And he has some great ideas that are being worked on, not just by him, but by people in drone responders and others about the fire service, new delivery methods, safe delivery methods, larger volumes at certain events. That's what they try to develop so that we, the regular rank and file, can do the best job we can, be the safest that we can be. We know that there's always the chance of a foul up someplace along the line. We just hope and pray that it doesn't happen to any of you. That's all we can say as veterans. Don't 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 be think you're smarter than you are. Learn, be willing to learn, open your mind up. These are the people who have done this for years already. Let them lead you. They're not here to berate you. They're not here to tease you, make fun of you. They're here to teach you because any day those tones can drop and you're going to be faced with a situation that you don't feel fully learned into it. It's a poor phrase, but and that you don't want to be in. You need to do that at the beginning. I had a person who was voted in the same night I was, and for some reason, I got put on the nozzle several times. And one of those times, this guy was going to back me up and told me, remember, just push into me as I open that bail. He goes, okay. And I felt a drop in the hose, but then the pressure was off again and put out the fire. And I turned to thank him for backing me up so well. And it wasn't him. I said to my captain, I said, where's so and so? He was right behind me when he got off the truck and I was getting ready to open the bail. He says, better go talk to the chief of that. So after he, gave me the pat out that we knocked the fire down and I could go take a break. I went he said, go see the chief. And I did. And I said, it's so and so. What happened to so and so? He was backing me up and then he was gone. He said, Stephen, he goes, when it came to it, because you've already been on the nozzle 3 times in the last 7 months, he goes, and I was glad to have him behind you, but you were so close in that uh, pantry cupboard area that was cooking off so hard. He wasn't comfortable getting that close to the fire. So I put what's his name instead. And I said, well, you're not going to throw him out of the department now. He goes, hell no, I'm not going to do that. He's a valuable member of our department. He's going to do fireground where he'll help throw ladders, help to change tanks, whatever we need to do on the fireground, he's going to be there for us. And I learned a year's worth of education within those few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that this chief of the department would give somebody another chance, not because they weren't unable, because they weren't comfortable. And let's be honest, the first time we all put the mask on, blacked out face, on, you were ready to poop your pants. Okay, you didn't know where to turn, you couldn't see anything, and they just listening to voices guide you. You can't fight fire that way. You have to have all the knowledge. You have to be open to learn. Yeah, even if you're the senior firefighter in that house, that doesn't mean you should stop learning. As a matter of fact, You should be teaching if you're the senior person in that house. That's the key. So, Chief, thank you so much for joining me once again. Always great to learn with you and for sharing your knowledge and your history with both these departments with our viewers and our listening audience. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me again.
It's our pleasure. And folks, if you're watching the video, this is where this episode will conclude. If you're listening to the audio version, you know that we'll have a couple of PSAs and a couple of more items to come up before we close out the show. To all of you who tuned in to watch this today, I'm listening to the audio. Thank you very much. We appreciate you very, very much. And again, please don't forget, we need your help to help our brothers and sisters in the fire service following a line of duty injury that waylaid them, or God forbid, they made the ultimate sacrifice. For us to help them and their families, we need your help. We're not asking for billions of dollars. We're asking $5 and $10 donations can help us quite a bit. All you have to do is go to our website, www.5-alarm-taskforcecorp.org. To scroll down the homepage to that picture of that bright and shiny federal Q2B, click on that, and our donation page will come up, and it'll come directly to us. So thank you for helping us too. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and let's make sure everyone goes home and that we take care of each other. Thanks for tuning in. Be safe. Bye-bye now.